Dan, a seasoned excavator worker in his mid-40s, had been diligently working at a newly discovered archaeological site. For several weeks, the site had yielded various historical artifacts, but nothing extraordinary. One afternoon, as Dan's shovel struck metal, his excitement surged. Carefully unearthing an old piece of knight armor, he quickly called over his colleagues who were equally intrigued. They decided to transport the armor back to their base for closer examination, understanding the potential significance of the find. Dan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this discovery. Little did he know, looking inside the armor would leave him utterly astounded. For several weeks, the newly discovered archaeological site had borne fruit of minor artifacts, pottery shards, coins, and the occasional trinket. Nothing of monumental significance caught the eye of Dan or his team. The sun beat down on them relentlessly, turning the earth into a stubborn opponent. Still, Dan worked with unwavering diligence, certain that something larger lay hidden beneath the layers of history. One afternoon, the dull thud of Dan's shovel striking metal echoed across the site. His heart raced as he paused, staring down at the dirt beneath him. "Guys, you might want to see this," he shouted excitedly. His colleagues quickly gathered around, their curiosity piqued. The sun glistened off the metal, hinting at an extraordinary discovery. What could it be? His hands trembled with anticipation. Dan's excitement was contagious as he carefully uncovered the piece of knight armor. "Get over here, quick," he called. His co-workers, Steve and Laura, jogged over, brows furrowed in intrigue. "What do you think it is?" Laura asked, eyes wide. "It looks like old armor," Steve replied, kneeling down. The team exchanged thrilled glances, understanding the historical significance. They knew this was just the beginning. Realizing the magnitude of their find, the team decided to transport the piece back to their base. The arduous task required delicate handling to ensure no damage was done. "Watch it. This is probably centuries old," Dan warned, guiding the makeshift stretcher. "Got it. Carefully now," Steve replied, steadying the load. Laura followed closely, her mind already racing with the possibilities of their incredible find. As they walked back to their base, Dan couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something more profound lay behind this discovery. "What's on your mind?" Laura asked, watching him closely. "I don't know," he confessed, "but this armor seems different." His colleagues nodded, sensing the same eerie significance. They knew their work had only just begun, and this find could lead to something extraordinary. Back at the base, the team gathered around a large table, ready to clean the armor piece by piece. "Let's get started," Dan said, pulling out brushes and tools. Laura and Steve followed suit. Each intricate detail they revealed spoke of a rich history. Minute by minute, their excitement grew as they uncovered more symbols and engravings, hinting at the armor's ancient and prestigious origin. As they meticulously cleaned the armor, Dan and his team noticed something extraordinary: the ornate engravings on the armor. "These designs aren't just decorative," Laura remarked, her voice tinged with awe. "This knight must have been of high status." Steve traced a finger over a crest that looked familiar yet elusive. "We've got to figure out who this belonged to," Dan said, eyes gleaming with curiosity. Despite the thrill of the discovery, Dan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this find than just the armor's surface allure. "This can't be it," he muttered under his breath. "What do you mean?" asked Steve, curious. "I think there's more to this than meets the eye," Dan replied. Everyone exchanged glances, their interest piqued anew. What could Dan be sensing? The team continued their study into the night. Laura, gripping a magnifying glass, examined the breastplate closely. "Wait a minute," she murmured, running her fingers over a small, almost invisible seam. "What is it?" Dan asked, stepping closer. "There's a hidden compartment here," Laura revealed, eyes widening. "Let's open it," Dan said, already reaching for his tools. The atmosphere buzzed with renewed anticipation. The hidden compartment looked tightly sealed. "No point in breaking it now," Steve sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. Dan nodded, reluctantly agreeing. "We'll examine it first thing tomorrow," he announced. Laura's eyes lingered on the compartment, her mind buzzing with questions. "Let's call it a night," she said, packing up her tools. The team left with an unspoken agreement to uncover its secrets the next day. While the team headed home, Dan stayed behind. "I'll catch up," he told them, determined. The office was empty and silent, amplifying his excitement. He meticulously gathered the books and tools he thought might help. Sitting alone under a dim light, Dan's mind raced through endless possibilities. The idea of being the first to peek inside fueled his determination. Tonight could change everything. The next day, a historian named Dr. Evelyn arrived to assist in deciphering the engravings. "Good to see you, Dr. Evelyn," Dan greeted her. "I hear you found something exceptional?" she asked, setting her bag down. "Yes, and we could use your expertise," Laura added. Dr. Evelyn examined the armor intently, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. "Let's begin," she said, already deeply absorbed in their find. Dr. Evelyn was fascinated by the craftsmanship of the armor. "This is remarkable," she said, inspecting every detail. However, what piqued her interest most was the hidden compartment. "This compartment is peculiar," she noted. Dan and Laura exchanged looks. "We haven't opened it yet," Dan explained. "Let's focus on that," Dr. Evelyn suggested, eager to uncover what lay inside. "Get the tools," she instructed with urgency. With specialized tools in hand, the team approached the compartment cautiously. "Easy does it," Dr. Evelyn advised, eyes fixed on the armor. Steve carefully pried open the seam, his hands steady. "I think we got it," he whispered. Inch by inch, the compartment gave way, revealing a tightly rolled piece of parchment. "Whoa, what's this?" Dan exclaimed, snatching it up. "Let's see," Dr. Evelyn said, eyes gleaming. To their surprise, the parchment was in excellent condition. "It's so well preserved," Laura remarked, her voice tinged with awe. Dr. Evelyn nodded. The airtight seal did its job. Dan unrolled it carefully on the table. They all leaned in closely, eager to decipher its secrets. "It looks ancient," Dan said, eyes wide with curiosity. "This could be groundbreaking," Dr. Evelyn whispered, barely containing her excitement. As the parchment unfurled, it revealed an ancient document filled with symbols and text in an unknown language. "This is unlike anything I've seen," Dr. Evelyn said, her finger tracing the lines. "Can you read it?" Steve asked, leaning in. "No, but it appears significant," she replied. The team exchanged puzzled looks. What had they stumbled upon? "We need an expert," Dan concluded, locking eyes with Dr. Evelyn. The discovery of the parchment added another layer of mystery to their find. "It's like peeling back layers of history," Laura mused aloud. "Every answer leads to more questions," Dan agreed. Dr. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "We've uncovered something extraordinary, but we need to decode it." The air buzzed with renewed intrigue. "Let's get to work," she directed, her voice charged with enthusiasm. Everyone nodded in agreement. To decipher the complex language, Dr. Evelyn called Professor Roger, a renowned linguistics expert. "We've found something right up your alley," she informed him over the phone. "I'll be there first thing tomorrow," he assured her. "In the meantime, we'll document everything," Dan suggested. "Good idea," she agreed. The team felt a mix of anticipation and impatience, convinced they were on the brink of a significant discovery. While waiting for Professor Roger, Dan's mind couldn't rest. He pondered the origins of the armor and parchments. What if this belonged to a legendary knight? He speculated aloud. Laura chuckled. Your imagination is running wild, Dan. Still, his curiosity refused to wane. Each symbol seemed like a tantalizing clue. One way or another, we'll find out, Dr. Evelyn assured him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. One evening, Dan decided to visit the local library to read up on medieval history. The musty smell of old books greeted him as he walked in. He wandered through the aisles until he found a section dedicated to medieval armory. Sitting at a table, he flipped through pages of various texts, scribbling notes. He needed to understand more about the origins of the armor they discovered and any potential significance it might hold. Dan's research led him to some fascinating discoveries. The style of the armor was consistent with knights who served under a legendary order known for their secretive missions and high status. His eyes widened as he read about the illustrious history associated with such armor. This is starting to make sense, he thought, jotting down every detail he deemed important. The puzzle was gradually coming together. Taking detailed notes, Dan was eager to share his findings with Dr. Evelyn the next day. He arrived at the base early, his notes clutched tightly in his hand. You won't believe what I found, he began, spreading his notes on the table. Dr. Evelyn leaned in, scanning the details. This armor might have belonged to knights serving a legendary order, he explained. Evelyn's eyes lit up with intrigue. Both Dan and Dr. Evelyn agreed the armor likely belonged to someone important, possibly even royal. The intricacy of these engravings suggests high-ranking nobility, Evelyn said. Dan nodded, pointing to his notes that highlighted various royal insignias. It's plausible this knight served directly under the king, he added. They felt a mix of excitement and pressure, realizing the gravity of their discovery. Every new detail pushed them closer to the truth. Professor Roger finally came back with the translation of the parchment. He hurried into the room, waving the document triumphantly. I've got it, he proclaimed. Everyone gathered around, anticipation thick in the air. What does it say? Laura asked, barely containing her excitement. It's a map, Roger replied, and it contains instructions, though somewhat cryptic. The room buzzed with energy as they discussed the significance of this new revelation. The parchment turned out to be a detailed map with cryptic instructions, seemingly leading to hidden treasure. Look at this symbol here, Roger pointed out, his finger tracing an ancient mark. It appears to be a landmark, perhaps a clue to a treasure. Dan's heart raced as he imagined what they could find. We need to follow this map precisely, Dan said, his voice full of determination. The entire team was buzzing with excitement over the discovery of the map and its potential for hidden treasure. However, Dan couldn't shake a sense of caution. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, he warned, thinking of the many unknowns that lay ahead. The thrill of adventure was palpable, yet Dan remembered the countless stories of traps and false leads. We have to proceed carefully, he reminded everyone. They held a meeting to decide their next steps, agreeing to follow the map's leads carefully. We need a solid plan, Dr. Evelyn stated. Laura and Steve nodded, each contemplating their roles. Let's break down the map and assign areas of responsibility, Dan suggested. The team mapped out their strategy, detailing every move they'd make. Remember, caution is key, Evelyn emphasized. Dan's earlier sense of apprehension echoed in everyone's minds. Laura pointed out the map could be a trap or a decoy, a common medieval practice to deter treasure hunters. We have to consider that possibility, she said, circling a particularly suspicious area on the map. Dan nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her words. Medieval times were rife with deception, he agreed. They all knew that while the map held promise, it also came with inherent risks they had to navigate wisely. Dan nodded, knowing they had to proceed wisely. "We need to take every precaution," he stressed, his tone serious. "Let's gather all the equipment we might need and double-check our plans," Steve added. They all agreed, understanding the magnitude of their mission. With their strategy polished, they moved forward, each team member assigned specific tasks. "We have to be thorough," Dan reiterated, ready to lead the way. Every step brought them closer to the unknown. Following the map, the team found themselves deep in the woods, standing before an ancient, abandoned chapel. It looked like it had been untouched for centuries, overgrown with ivy and surrounded by towering trees. "This must be it," Dan said, glancing back at the map. Laura and Steve looked around warily, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. "Let's check it out," Laura suggested, stepping forward cautiously. The chapel, though dilapidated, showed signs of once being a place of great importance. The wooden doors, though weathered and creaky, bore intricate carvings of knights and mythical creatures. "Look at these details," Steve said, running his hand over the engravings. Inside, dust-covered pews and shattered stained glass windows hinted at a long-forgotten splendor. "This place must have seen some incredible events," Laura murmured, captivated by the ruins' history. As they explored the ruins, Dan's keen eyes caught something familiar. "Guys, look at this," he called out. On the worn stone walls were symbols, matching those engraved on the knight's armor. Laura and Steve joined him, their eyes widening in recognition. "These are the same symbols," Steve confirmed. The team felt a surge of excitement, realizing they were on the right path. Every symbol seemed to piece together the puzzle. It soon became clear that the trail didn't end there. "These symbols are leading us somewhere," Dan observed, tracing them further inside the chapel. Laura nodded. "It's like a breadcrumb trail." The deeper they went, the more symbols they found, some seemingly hidden in plain sight. "We have to keep going," Steve urged, feeling the weight of their discovery. Their journey was far from over, and each step brought them closer to the truth. Within the altar, hidden in a small nook, Dan found another clue, a key near a locked stone door. "This must be important," he said, holding up the key for everyone to see. Laura and Steve exchanged excited glances. "Let's see where it fits," Laura suggested. They turned their attention to the stone door, its heavy structure looming before them. "This could be it," Dan said, feeling the anticipation build. The engravings on the stone door matched those on the parchment, indicating they were getting closer. "These symbols are identical," Steve noted, pointing out the similarities. Dan nodded. "It's a sign that we're on the right track." The door seemed to invite them in, the key fitting the ancient lock perfectly. "We're about to uncover something big," Laura murmured, her voice a mix of excitement and caution. The air buzzed with anticipation. The key fit perfectly into the stone door, revealing a hidden passageway that descended into the earth. "There it is," Steve said, peering into the dark depths. The passageway looked ancient, its walls lined with more enigmatic symbols. "We need to go down there," Dan said, his voice firm. Laura and Steve nodded, readying their flashlights and tools. "Let's take it slow and steady," Laura suggested, leading the way cautiously. The team, led by Dan, cautiously ventured into the passageway, armed with flashlights and excavation tools. The air grew cooler and damper as they descended. "Watch your step," Steve warned, noticing the uneven ground. The flickering flashlight beams revealed narrow walls and low ceilings. This place is definitely ancient, Laura observed. We need to stick together, Dan instructed, keeping everyone close. Every step echoed, adding to the sense of adventure and urgency. They navigated through a series of tunnels, each more challenging than the last. Some were narrow and forced them to crawl, while others opened into cavernous chambers. "This is insane," Steve muttered, squeezing through a tight spot. "We're getting closer. I can feel it," Dan said, forging ahead. Laura followed, her breath coming in short, determined bursts. "Just a bit further," she encouraged, feeling the thrill of their relentless pursuit. The journey tested their endurance and resolve. In one chamber, they discovered ancient relics and statues depicting scenes of knights in battle. "Look at these!" Laura gasped, shining her flashlight on a series of statues. "These knights were prepared for something," Dan remarked, studying the relics closely. Steve picked up a small, intricately carved object. "These are more than just relics. They tell a story," he noted. The chamber felt like a hidden museum, each artifact a piece of history. Dan's heart raced as they progressed through the winding tunnels, feeling that the final revelation was near. He exchanged determined glances with Laura and Steve, each step echoing louder in the narrow passage. The anticipation in the air was palpable, driving them forward despite the creeping fatigue. "We're almost there," Dan murmured, his words a mixture of hope and excitement. Nobody wanted to turn back now. Deeper into the tunnels, the team stumbled upon several traps set to deter grave robbers. "Watch out," Steve warned, stopping short just in time. Hidden pitfalls and tripwires were evidence of medieval ingenuity. "These are carefully laid out," Laura observed, her mind racing with the implications. "We have to proceed with extreme caution," Dan instructed, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Each trap underscored the importance of what lay ahead. One by one, they carefully disarmed the traps. Dan's hands steadied as he worked on the mechanisms, sweating under the pressure. "I've got this one," he said, quickly disabling a tripwire. Laura followed his lead, disarming a hidden spike trap. "These are complex," she noted. Steve tackled another, nodding in agreement. Each successful disarmament only heightened their collective resolve, emphasizing the significance of their quest. Tension grew as the team found another chamber sealed by a massive stone door. "Looks like we've hit another obstacle," Dan stated, stepping aside to examine the monumental barrier. Laura ran her fingers over its surface. "There must be a way in." Steve joined in, noting the engravings that likely held clues. The chamber's daunting presence amplified the stakes, pressing upon them the need to unlock its secrets. The stone door required a special sequence of actions to unlock. "It's not just brute force," Steve remarked, studying the door with narrowed eyes. Laura nodded. "There's a pattern here." They realized the engravings and symbols weren't merely decorative. They were part of an intricate puzzle. "We need to decode this step by step," Dan advised, placing his hand on a carved symbol, guiding the process. Precision was paramount. Using the symbols from the armor and the parchment, they decoded the riddle. "These match perfectly," Laura observed, pointing out corresponding symbols. Dan and Steve worked together to piece the sequence. "Here, try this combination," Dan suggested. The mechanisms within the stone door clicked and whirred in response. "It's working," Steve confirmed, turning another piece. Finally, the door began to groan, signaling their success. As the door swung open, they found an ancient underground vault. "Incredible," Laura whispered as the torchlight flickered inside. Dan stepped cautiously into the vault, his excitement tempered by awe. The space was vast, filled with the echoes of history. "Look at this place," Steve marveled, his eyes scanning every corner. The discovery was overwhelming, each relic confirming the vault's age and significance. They had truly stumbled upon something monumental. The vault's walls were adorned with medieval tapestries telling stories of valor and sacrifice. "These must be centuries old," Dan noted, stepping closer to inspect them. The detailed embroidery depicted epic battles and noble deeds, each tapestry a masterpiece. "These are incredible," Laura said, her eyes wide with admiration. Steve traced his fingers along a tattered edge. "They've been preserved so well." The tapestries added a solemn dignity to their discovery. Within the vault, they discovered numerous chests filled with gold coins, jewels, and artifacts. "We hit the jackpot!" Steve exclaimed, opening one of the chests. Laura's eyes sparkled with disbelief. "This is unreal." Dan lifted a gold coin, its weight confirming its authenticity. "Each piece tells a story," he mused. The treasure was beyond anything they'd anticipated, each chest holding untold wealth and historical significance. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. The sheer magnitude of their discovery overwhelmed them. "This is beyond anything we could have imagined," Dan said, his voice hushed with awe. Laura nodded. "We've uncovered a treasure trove of history." Steve stood silently, processing the immense value of what lay before them. "We need to catalog everything," he finally said. "Document each item meticulously," Dan agreed, pulling out a notebook. The weight of their find settled over them reality. Despite the immense treasure they had discovered, Dan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. "There has to be more," he mused, pacing around the vault. Laura noticed his restlessness. "What do you think we've missed?" she asked. Dan shook his head. "I'm not sure, but this doesn't feel like the end of the story." The sense of an unfinished mystery gnawed at him. Venturing further into the far corners of the vault, Dan's keen eyes caught sight of a smaller, almost inconspicuous chest. "What's this?" he muttered, crouching down. Laura and Steve quickly joined him, their curiosity piqued. "It's different from the others," Laura noted, observing its intricate design. "Could this be what we've been missing?" Steve pondered. They exchanged determined looks, ready to uncover what lay inside. Unlike the other chests, this one was secured with a complex mechanical lock. "This is no ordinary lock," Dan said, examining it closely. "We can't force it open without damaging what's inside," Steve warned. Laura nodded in agreement. "We need to figure out the mechanism." The intricate lock was a puzzle in itself, each piece meticulously designed. The air grew thick with anticipation as they brainstormed how to unlock it. Dan and the team worked meticulously to decipher the lock, their hands steady but minds racing. "Try this," Laura suggested, rotating a dial carefully. Steve observed each movement, ready to offer his insights. "We're close. I can feel it," Dan murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. Every twist and turn built the anticipation. They knew that each passing minute brought them closer to uncovering whatever secret was hidden within. Finally, the lock clicked open with a satisfying sound. Dan lifted the lid cautiously, revealing a small, elaborate box inside the chest. "Look at this," he said, his voice filled with awe. The box was unlike anything they had seen before, shimmering under the dim light. "It's beautiful," Laura whispered, her fingers grazing its surface. Steve nodded. "It definitely holds something important." Their curiosity soared as they prepared to open it. The smaller box was a masterpiece, made from a unique combination of metals and adorned with precious stones. "This craftsmanship is extraordinary," Steve remarked, his eyes tracing its details. "It must have been made by a master artisan," Laura added. Dan carefully examined the box, noting its intricate design. "This isn't just any box, it's special," he said, his voice tinged with anticipation. The team knew they were on the brink of another significant discovery. With trembling hands, Dan opened the box, revealing yet another parchment and an ancient, ornate ring inside. "Look at this," he said, lifting the ring carefully. Laura's eyes widened. "It's exquisite." Steve inspected the parchment. "Does this look familiar?" he asked. "It's in the same mysterious language," Dan confirmed. The discovery of the ring and parchment only deepened the mystery, sparking a wave of excitement and curiosity among the team. The new parchment contained what appeared to be another handwritten note, still in the enigmatic and unfamiliar language. "It's definitely linked to the previous one," Laura observed. Steve squinted at the parchment. "We need Roger again to decipher this." "The last piece of the puzzle," he said, carefully placing the items back in the box. The ancient language and artifacts added another layer to their already complex discovery. Understanding the importance of their latest find, they quickly called Professor Roger. "We have another parchment for you," Dan informed him. "I'll come right over," Roger responded, excitement in his voice. The team waited impatiently, knowing Roger's expertise was crucial for their next step. "We need to be ready to act on whatever he deciphers," Laura said. The anticipation of the final translation kept them all on edge. Professor Roger arrived and took the new parchment with him, promising to provide translations by the next day. "I'll work on it immediately," he assured the team. They knew they had to wait, their nerves tingling with suspense. "Tomorrow, we'll have our answers," Dan said, trying to stay calm. "And then we'll know," Steve added. They spent the evening preparing, unable to contain their anticipation for what the next day would bring. The next day, Professor Roger arrived at the site with the translated note in hand. Dan, Laura, and Steve gathered around, anxious to hear what he had discovered. "I've got the translations," Roger said, holding the parchment delicately. The room was filled with a tense anticipation. "What did you find?" Laura asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Roger unfolded the note and began to read. "This note is incredible," Roger began, his eyes scanning the words. "It speaks of a knight assigned to guard a secret far more valuable than any treasure we've found so far." The room went silent. Dan leaned in. "What kind of secret are we talking about?" Roger looked up, his eyes wide with astonishment. "A secret of immense power and significance," he replied, leaving everyone stunned. Roger continued, "The note explains that the knight was a guardian of a secret, a relic of unimaginable value. This guardian dedicated his life to its protection." Dan exchanged glances with Laura and Steve, their eyes widening. "So, it's not just about the treasure?" Steve asked. Roger shook his head. "No, it's about something far greater, something that has been hidden and protected for centuries." "The parchment details the knight's mission," Roger read aloud, his voice filled with awe. "This knight was charged with protecting a sacred relic." Laura leaned in closer. "What kind of relic?" Roger paused briefly before answering. "One believed to possess immense power and wisdom, a relic that could change the course of history," he revealed. The gravity of their discovery began to sink in, leaving them all in quiet contemplation. "This relic," Roger continued, "is said to grant immense power and wisdom to whoever possesses it." Dan's eyes widened. "Power and wisdom," he echoed. Roger nodded. "Potentially, it could alter the direction of history itself. That's why the knight dedicated his life to keeping it safe." Steve let out a low whistle. "Makes the treasure seem trivial in comparison." The team realized they had stumbled upon something extraordinary. According to the note, Roger explained, the relic is hidden deep inside the final chest we found. Dan nodded, reflecting on their journey. The knight dedicated his life to protecting this relic, he murmured, feeling the weight of their discovery. Laura and Steve looked at the final chest, their eyes filled with anticipation. "This is it," Laura said softly. They knew they were on the verge of uncovering something monumental. With trembling hands, Dan opened the final chest, his heart pounding with excitement. Inside, nestled in a bed of velvet, was the ancient artifact. He couldn't believe his eyes as he gazed upon it. "It's beautiful," Laura whispered, her voice trembling with awe. The artifact radiated an aura of ancient power and mystery. "This is incredible," Dan finally said, his voice filled with wonder. The team stood in awe, realizing the true significance of their discovery. "This relic has the potential to change everything we know about history," Laura whispered. Dan nodded. "It's beyond anything we could have imagined." Steve couldn't take his eyes off the artifact. "We're witnessing history firsthand," he said. The room was filled with a profound sense of discovery and the monumental impact of what they had found. The team knew that their find would change everything they had thought they knew about history. "This relic holds such immense power," Roger said, his voice tinged with awe. "It redefines our understanding of the past." Dan and his team felt a whirlwind of emotions. "We have to handle this responsibly," Dan noted. Laura and Steve nodded, realizing the gravity and potential impact of their discovery. History felt like it was being rewritten. Their astonishment grew as they contemplated the implications of the relic's power. "Imagine the impact this could have on society," Steve mused. Dan nodded. "Not just society, entire civilizations." Laura added, "We have to ensure this knowledge is used wisely." As they stood in the presence of the ancient relic, they understood the responsibility that came with their discovery. The weight of its potential power was immense, changing their understanding of history and the future.